All right, let's get to it. This should be an interesting one. Bundle up. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Welcome to the library. I am Tennessee Fats. I'm coming to you from here today because today we're going to do a little side step. That's right. Normally we talk about Robert E. Howard and we do a lot of Sword and Sorcery stuff. And some of you will remember a while ago, I dropped an Easter egg on the channel that looked a little bit like that. That's right, this is an image from way back in the day when DC decided it would do this explosion of Sword and Sorcery related titles. Now, they weren't all Sword and Sorcery, but the majority of them were. And we said, well, let's start digging through these things and see exactly what DC was doing. We've already gone through the Claw the Unconquered one, and we talked about that and did a little bit of a deep dive into that character. Today we're going to go into the second one. Let's take a look at that image again. Today we're going front and center. We're diving into Stalker. Now, Stalker is a really, well, unique character. This was an interesting project, and it wasn't a small one by any means. This was a grandiose thing that they were diving into at the time. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take some time. We're going to talk about who is Stalker, what is Stalker, what's the world Stalker lives in, and then we'll dive through some of the things that I think they were really going for when they made this, because it only became a 4-part series. That was it. It was canceled after only 4 issues. So let's dive into that. Then we're going to come back and we'll wrap this whole thing up and say, well, do you need to go buy these? All right, let's get into it. So what is a Stalker? Well, this is an interesting question because when you look at the character of Stalker and you look at this 4-part series, you really aren't just getting a character, you're getting a world. Let's take a look at the cover here. I'm going to show you guys the cover of the first issue. I'm going to put it up over here. We're going to keep that there for a minute, not for too long, just for a short period of time so you guys can get a sense of what this is. Really, the cover does tell the story in this case. It's the quest for the lost soul. Stalker is a child that unfortunately grows up in a bad way, decides to really get himself into an indentured servitude position where he's not that happy with it after a couple of years, and he then turns around and sells his soul to a demon. And after the fact, realizes, hey, that might not have been a good idea, and goes back and decides to undo it. That's effectively the Stalker character. And this is the first story arc that explains that character, explains the world that he's in, and really explains what his modus operandi is. Now, what I'm going to do here is we're going to do the old school Tennessee Fats channel. We're going to flip the camera around here. We're going to go into the books and we're starting to go through these 4 issues. And I'm going to show you guys some of the highlight points in these that I thought really were indicative of the point that this is not just a character. It's a world. Let's get into that. All right, I've already taken the comics out of the bags and boards, so we don't have to see me fumbling with those because these old man hands can only do so much. Let's get into this thing here. Let's take a look at what we got. And I want you guys to understand why this isn't just a character building exercise, it's a world building exercise. So Stalker, the cover here kind of really does give it away, all right? He's a guy and he's on a quest to get his stolen soul. But this is the origin issue, so we're going to start to understand why he exists and how this whole thing came about. And really what the story is, it's a story of a child who just didn't get what he wanted and was not having a good life. It's just not going well. Now, throughout this, what I am going to point out is keep an eye out for all these classic Ditko poses. This is a key one right here. You'll see this pose right here, recurring in a variety of different places in early Spider-Man and in early Doctor Strange. So the story starts with Stalker actually attacking a castle and throwing a knife with a warning at this queen being an individual that he's not a big fan of. And the reason why, we find out, is the fact that as a child he was kicked out and he was forced to live on the streets, didn't have a good life going on, and finally decided at the end of the day that he would make himself a serf of this queen. A serf in the way that he would go and he would work for her and then he'd become a knight of the land, and that would be the idea. The queen having absolutely no intention whatsoever of actually making him a knight, just said, I just want an extra slave in the house. Let's get this kid on board. Kid comes on board and discovers after a couple of years he ain't too happy with it and decides, no, I'm lashing out. You're going to make me a knight. I'm done sweeping for you, lady. And they go off and they're basically going to literally institute corporal punishment on this poor kid. But because he's a bit of a tough ass, he grabs the whip, ends up diving out of the window, and takes off. And he decides, I want revenge. I gave years to this lady. I want revenge. Goes off to the actual shrine, or the temple of this god, Dgirth. D-G-I-R-T-H. Where are we here? Let's see if we can find it. There, Dgirth. D-G-R-T-H. And in the process here, his plan is to pray for the power to go back to punish this queen, this lady who took years of his life. And you don't really expect much to come of this. However, Dgirth, on the other hand,
he has no issues whatsoever with bringing the kid on board. He's like, yeah, here's me, no problem. Here's what you want. Give me your soul, and what I'll do is I'll give you everything you need to be the greatest warrior in the land, because I'm the god of warriors. But the funny part is, we've already heard the reference that not only is he a god, but he's also a demon. Kind of an interesting twist there. And this, I think, speaks a little bit to the Ditko influence on this, where you look at Ditko's idea of, no, you're either right or wrong. Which one are you? Black, white. This is where he came up with the idea of Mr. A, right? So, Demon Lord Dagirth, yeah, he's like, yeah, no problem. I know you're a demon. What do you need? Give me all these things here. I'll be able to do all this stuff and be the best you got. I don't need my soul. You can have it when I'm dead. Little does the kid realize, Dagirth is taking his soul now. Rips it out of him, and he suddenly comes up, and this is the indicator that you now know his soul is gone, is his eyes are these burning red pits. And at this point in time, he says, okay, now I've got the power, I'm going to go back, and this is what takes us to the opening of why he was giving a warning to this lady, saying, listen, I will be coming for you, but in order to make her suffer, he says, I'll be coming for you in a year. So you know in a year, I'll be here and I'll get you. But you just sit there and worry about how long it's going to take for me to get here before I come back. Kind of interesting thing, and he's really riding the high here. He's like, yeah, I'm having a great time, everything's going well, but I'm really not feeling any joy or any sort of enjoyment of what I'm doing here. Hey, wait, maybe it's because my soul's gone. And he's like, oh, yeah, this is not what I agreed to. I'm not a happy kid. I want this back. So this is where he starts his quest to go back and try to get back. So he ends up going back to the temple and runs into one of the priests of Dagirth that's there and says, no. Listen, you want to talk to Dagirth, you got to get yourself to hell. Unfortunately, I don't have any way for you to get to hell. The only guy who knows how to get there is actually the guy that heads up our overall group of people, and he's way off in our temple at the world's end. And at this point in time, Stalker, who doesn't even have a name, says, all right, well, you're useless to me, I'll just kill you and off I go then. Because again, he doesn't have any sense of emotion because his soul is gone. And this again speaks to that point of where I believe Steve Ditko was involved a fair amount in the character creation, because you don't just have a character that's a classic sword and sorcery character, you have a character that really is following that whole Mr. A type rationale that Steve Ditko used so often in a lot of his writing. Now, that's kind of cool, and that's a good intro story, and you would think here that you're going to head off, and we're going to come back to this whole idea of, punishing that queen that turned him into basically a slave, and that's going to come back into the story. But we're left with a little bit of an interview with the creative team. It's fine. But we're left with this down here in the bottom. Somebody took the time to draw a map. Now this is fascinating. He's got to ride to World's End. That's where he's got to go to meet with the priest who knows how to get to hell, so he can then demand his soul back. But look at the earth. This is the world they live in. It's a fascinating little world here. You've got a hilly country, you've got a cold wastelands, which I'm guessing is a desert, and you've got this burning island down here. Really an interesting thing. Why would they have done this if they were just creating a character? I would argue it doesn't make sense. This map, to me, is what's telling me that they actually put a lot more work into this character, the world that he's from, and the overall place that he's going to, than just here's a typical sword and sorcery thing that we can then crank out a book for. And this comes back in a couple places. So issue 1, that was it. That gives you the brief highlight of what happened there. Let's get into issue 2. Now, as I mentioned, issue 2 and 3, and I'm going to mention this right now, not the greatest parts of work, not the greatest pieces of writing. The story here kind of muddles along a little bit. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. But what I am going to point out are a couple important things that come out of these. These are the little snippets that tell you there's more to this earth than just this guy who's on a quest to get his soul back. And one of the key things here, and this doesn't happen all that often, so I wanted to point this out. Let me see if I can find this thing one more time here. No, I think it's at the end. Hold on. We're going to get there. Oh, there's that classic image we had at the beginning of the video. Wait for it. There we are. See map last issue. This story, and I fumbled through it here because we're not here to go page by page. I'm just here to highlight some things. The story is where he gets to basically the temple at World's End. He gets found out, and it's interesting. And there's a couple little incidences in here which really do speak to that Ditko-esque influence. For example, the fact that he's here and he's basically trying to get information on how to get to hell. They're clearly leading in slaves or sacrifices. He doesn't care. He's not going to have anything to do with that. He's just running along. Snake's going to attack him. He's just going to kill the snake. He doesn't care. All speaking to that cold aspect of who he's become because he doesn't have a soul anymore. It's almost like he's lost his sense of right or wrong or some sort of moral compass. I don't know where that's coming from. I think maybe they would have delved into that a little more if they had the chance. But this is an interesting one. He references the burning isle here. And this is, unfortunately, near the end of the story where this head priest guy who knows how to get to hell is finally spilling the beans. And right at the bottom, see map last issue, editor. The editor is drawing your attention back to that map. If that was something they just created, just, here's us spitballing an idea for reference, let's just throw it out here once and we'll be done with it. That'd be one thing. No. We're being told to go back and reference it. They want us to know where it is. They want us to know the distances that are being traveled. And they want us to know literally the world that he's in is not our world. Take a look at that map. Fascinating issue and how that draws back to it. You can read more into the details. There's all sorts of little nuances in here of how he's losing more and more of his sense of humanity because he's lost his soul. It's interesting, like the lady who decided that helped him escape, that was a prisoner within that temple. She's like, okay, well, I'll come with you. Everything will be fine. He's like, no. Smacks the horse, drives her away so he can get on a boat and go off on his own because he doesn't care. He's got one purpose in life, and that's to get his soul back. He's like, no, I don't have time for you. Off you go. Quite a funny little tie-in there. All right, issue 3, he does get to the Burning Isle, and he's attacked, and blah, blah, blah. Typical sort of sword and sorcery type of stuff. But in the end of this, he does end up getting into the gateway that takes him to hell, and that's kind of interesting. But this is where we have a little bit of a lean-to here into the story that kind of makes, and we get more of a sense of the world that he's living in. And I believe it is. Hold on. Bear with me. We're turning pages. Because, come on. There it is. This is where we get an interesting thing now. So Stalker has had to find his way to this pit of hell. How is he going to get through there? And he's on an island. It's called the Burning Island. And it's funny because it's so cold. It's covered in ice, but there's no sense of cold to it. And snow, which is a weird dichotomy. And he's finding all these weird carvings. And the lady who he meets that's already on the island, who turns out to be this monster over here, by the way, saying, well, don't you remember that really there were stories of how there were people who came to our planet that were our gods. They traveled in ships that weren't ships. They didn't sail upon the sea. And Stalker reminds them, says, yes, well, those are the people that we banished to the pit of hell through the hole. And because mankind rode up against them or fought against them, which is kind of an interesting twist. So he's saying mankind rose up against these gods and drove them away, created the actual opening that leads to hell. And man's the only one who can open it again. Well, it turns out that she's a monster and she's just been toying with him. She attacks him and of course he wins. And off he goes through the little pit here. He's going to head off into hell and away he goes. But interesting that you've got this story where you're now involving spaceships actually coming to this planet. Now, you can go watch the Ancient Aliens TV show all day long. They'll constantly try to tell you that ancient aliens are real, right or wrong. But it's not a new idea. It's an old idea. Quite interesting that actually draws it in right off the bat and drops that scarecrow of, hey, aliens, pay attention. Issue 4, this is, I think, the nice piece of wrap-up in the story where it really ended this first story arc. And he's in hell and he basically fights off a bunch of demons. But in here is where we start to see a little more delving into what I'm going to say is Dagurth's overall realm. You remember we went to the temple at the beginning, and that temple is because he's the god or the demon, the lord demon of all warriors. Well, warriors are being lorded over by a demon. That's not necessarily a good thing. Who would want to be a warrior in that case? The sense of right or wrong is kind of lost in this world. But what we have here, all the warriors that were the greatest warriors are trapped here in hell by a Dagurth, to the point where they can finally start fighting the giant battle that's prophesized where they're going to overthrow hell. But these are good warriors. These are not bad warriors. These are good guys. But they're trapped in hell. Very, very interesting twist. And it's kind of interesting. If you look at them, they're almost very Jack Kirby-esque the way they're drawn here. Really an interesting twist in this one. These all look like the sort of medieval type monsters or things beyond that. But things takes a little twist to the side here. Obviously, Stalker's going to have to go through some tests. Dagurth is not having a good time with this. He's like, yeah, whatever. You're going to have to pass all my tests. Interesting that you got this fancy little Tarzan thing in the middle of the pom-poms. I thought that was kind of neat. And the final test is a right or wrong test, and it's a mental test where he's trapped in basically nothingness. And this, again, speaks to the Ditko component of the creation of the character and the writing. I don't believe he was just doing pencils. I think he was involved in a lot more than this. Because here the character basically wills himself back. because he knows he exists. Therefore, he shouldn't be in nowhere and wills himself right back into existence. Dagirth is quite happy about this because he said, well, these have all been tests and it was all done just so you could become my leader or my head guy out there. And, well, Stalker's not going to have that. Stalker says, no. I'm going to go and get all those guys that were back there. And I'm actually going to lead this army against you. And this is going to be the battle that actually frees all these guys from hell. And here's all these good knights or what have you. They're not drawn to be really good looking, but they're actually fighting for the side of right here. They do overtake all the fire demons that Dagirth can actually throw at them. But it's interesting. Here's where this is really the point where I said, okay, now I know there was world building going on here. This isn't just some throwaway. What the hell is that? Take a moment there. That's a spaceman. This is a spaceman shooting a laser to fight the knights. And it's in the write-up, it actually says it's not just the warriors who had regressed. It also included the original spacemen that came to this place to settle it before the regression back when they lost technology. So it's not just these sort of medieval knights that are trapped here, but also the very souls of the spacemen that actually came to this world to settle it. Like, pretty cool. And the other kicker here that really gives it away that this is not Earth, but that it's somewhere different. I don't know how many horses that have a giant nose horn sticking out like that. It kind of looks weird. Anyway, the battle ends, and he ends up talking to Dagirth. And this is an interesting one, because Dagirth's like, okay, well, you were supposed to lead my dudes, but now you freed everybody, and that's kind of a problem. He's like, well, listen, just give me my soul and I'll be gone. Dagirth drops the bombshell, and he's like, okay, well, here's the good news and the bad news. I can't, because, you gave me your soul, and that's now part of me. The only way you can get that back is if I cease to exist. Like, you can literally sit here and stab my physical form. It's not going to make any difference until all the worshippers of me cease to exist. That soul can't be freed. You can't just get it out. And he says, well, this is going to be a problem. And he's like, and of course, this is when Dagirth is like, listen, you got no choice here. You got no feelings. You have no emotions. You're not ever going to enjoy anything. Just join me and everything will be fine. And Stalker's like, no. I'm going to go back and kill every single person on the planet that worships you so that you cease to exist so I can get my soul back. And it ends off with him saying, I'm going to banish all evil from this world. Not banish, everybody who just happens to worship this guy, because this guy is a demon. He is clearly identified now. This guy is literally, for this world's version of a personification of all evil. So he's going to end all evil so that he can get his soul back. Very, very Ditko-esque. That is some key world building right there. Very interesting. So really there's two pieces of this that sort of make me say, okay, definitely a world building exercise. One, well, they created a map. Creating a map is kind of the very process of being world building to begin with. That kind of tells you that right off the bat. Two, space aliens. Literally, spacemen came and actually settled this planet. They're actually writing a history here that's based on aliens. Aliens that just happen to be, maybe, us from the future. Okay, now that's just trippy.
All right, so what did DC have here? Let's get back to what actually occurred here. Well, here's what happened. And as I mentioned a couple times when you're going through the books, really what we're looking at here is a world building exercise. When Paul Levitz was creating this, he didn't just create the character in isolation, he created a world. And there are fascinating aspects of that we saw when we went through the books, like the fact that they took the whole map, the fact that they referenced back to the map. They were trying to get the readers to actually get this idea of a world in their head that wasn't the Earth, because it has its own map, it's got its own world, its own areas. And then when you get to the end, you get to the point that it's actually, this isn't just its own world, it's its own world that's a settlement from another world. And that was the little Easter egg that was hidden in the end there, which was sort of shocking. Went, holy crap! And that just really created that level of depth that now creates the world and the character in a somewhat intertwined way. Now, how do we know this was actually something that even DC recognizes that perhaps they might not have been in the right on chopping off too soon? Well, I'll tell you how. Quite frankly put, they kept trying to bring it back. If you go on the interweb thing that I talk about a lot, if you go on that and you actually take the time to type in Stalker and DC Comics, you'll see the number of times that DC has tried to bring the character back in different formats. They even brought it back, I think, in the New 52. Yeah, it was in the New 52. And I think they've actually done it in Batman Beyond as well. So you're talking about a variety of even recent times where they've tried to bring this character back, because the idea of a guy with no soul out there trying to do his thing is really a fascinating concept. And it is something that can, in a way, become timeless. Can this character actually die? Well, We actually don't know. And that's the fascinating aspect of this 4-part series, is it leaves you with a point where you have so many questions where you say, I wish I knew. Now, do you need to own this? Well, now herein, okay, I can do a lot of finger stuff going back. No, listen, here's the bottom line. Do you need to own this? Honestly, you probably don't. You probably don't need to own this because the character is somewhat obscure. It's only 4 parts, and the odds of you running into this, even if you're an avid DC reader, the odds of you running into this character in any of the places where they brought him back and then written him right back out, probably pretty slim. You don't need to know this one. Is it a nice to have book? Really, it is. It's actually a rather good sword and sorcery story. It's somewhat trite in the way it runs through issues 2 and 3, but 1 and 4 really were excellent stories that bring us, here's the beginning, and the middle was kind of middling, and then the end, the cataclysmic end. Both of these massive world-building exercises bookending the actual overall story arc. Really, really well done. But here's the thing. Don't tell anybody this, but if you want some cheap Steve Ditko and Wally Wood, pick these up. And I say that because Steve Ditko was looking for work at the time. You can even read that when you go on the interweb and read about Stalker, and you'll see that really this was given to Steve Ditko because he needed work. At least that's the reference that I found. Steve Ditko turned around and said, hey, you know what? Let's get a really good inker on this one, Wally Wood. Let's bring you in on this guy. Here are 2 massive powerhouses of comic creativity that are highly sought after and highly collectible now that really you cannot find at a reasonable rate anywhere. You can pick up all 4 of these books for probably less than $20. That's a good thing for Steve Ditko and Wally Wood. So, do you need it for the story side? Probably not so much. Is it nice to have? Yes. Do you need to have it? Probably not. For the art, do you really want to have this? Well, if you're a Ditko or Wally Wood fan, yes. All right, let's wrap this bad boy up. I tell you, everybody, this was an interesting one for me, and honestly, I had a lot of fun going out and finding these books. I actually showcased issue 1 on the channel probably months ago now, because I got it into the house, and I was really shocked that I actually found a copy of this. And when I was flipping through it, I was floored by the fact that the art was so reminiscent of early Spider-Man and early Doctor Strange. And I remember looking at it at the time thinking, why am I seeing this? Because I honestly flipped right past the first page and totally missed the artist credit. Then I got to actually one panel, and it's funny, I kind of made fun of this panel when I went back and I did that in that Easter egg earlier. And I was like, this doesn't seem stereotypically Wally Wood at all. No, not at all. And if you saw it and you know, you know. I went out and picked up the rest of these, and they weren't that hard to find. It was literally on the internet, and I had these in the house fairly quick and at a reasonable price. Now, they're not 9.8 candidates by any means, but they're great reader copies. And honestly, they're fantastic pieces of art. The story, as I say, issues 2 and 3, meh. But issues 1 and 4, and the world building that happened in that, and then when you're looking at it throughout, looking at the Steve Ditko and Wally Wood art, it's really something. And it's funny because I look at it and really appreciate this art because, well, I'm a big Wally Wood fan. But funny part about this was, even when this was going out, if you read the letters that I think are in the back of issue 3, or was it issue 4, the fans at the time, they were not liking this. In fact, one of them was rather critical, saying, this is not quality Steve Ditko and Wally Wood art. Like, this is not there. And I just thought that was a fascinating reference to see that was contemporaneous to when these were being published. Unfortunately, they didn't sell. Bottom line was, these things did not get off the shelf fast enough, and it was kiboshed right after the first story arc was ended, which is, it's a shame. I actually do like to see this character doing a little bit more. I would like to see him going off and developing a little further in the adventures. It's not like a Hyborian Age world that we're talking about here. It's definitely sort of a medieval world. But it'd be interesting to get a little bit more of the history of the world they did create here, because unfortunately it was truncated and we really don't have a sense of what this is. This would be a really cool multiverse world for DC to delve more into. Kind of like the Claw the Unconquered world was. Or what's the other one? Stargirl? I think that's Starfire. That's the other one. Very interesting, different world as well. Love to see this develop more. Unfortunately, just never happened. That's it. Everybody, I hope you enjoyed this one. As I say, a little different than the norm, but we did stay in the sword and sorcery genre. We'll see you in the next video. All right, it is Easter egg time. We are back at the post-credit scenes. You guys have already seen the images of Bean the comic-eating cat. We're at that point in the video. We're back at the desk where we have our chat, our little tete-a-tete, our one-on-one, where you talk about a variety of things. Now, today we talked about that Stalker series, and I gotta say, it's right here, actually. This was really a lot of fun to read. It's interesting that you go back and you find these little things that on the surface seem like they're really, well, somewhat trite and really sort of trivial. Like this 4-part series, when I was reading it initially, I was like, wow, this was really like light. Like where was the content? And then that's only when I was thinking about it afterwards, I was like, actually, there's some real depth here. And then I started to go back into the actual books and start putting 2 and 2 together. I guess for some reason I read really a lot on the surface, and then maybe I don't read a lot underneath, which is funny because that little OCD me in the back of my head is constantly picking at little threads all the time, trying to find connections that either are or are not there. But in this one, for some reason, I just flew through it, and it was only after the fact I went, oh, that actually is really deep. And it's really that change where I don't even know how to pronounce that, where the demon guy really changes from he's a god for warriors to I'm the personification of all evil, and how Stalker changes at the end of the story to the point where he's now going to go off and end all evil, which is really something that's too large of a concept probably to parlay well into comics. Maybe that's another reason why this didn't sell well initially and why the series truncated. When Claw, which launched right around the same time, continued along and was doing fine. Warlord ran for what, 100 and some odd issues? It launched around the same time as well. But again, maybe those stories were dealing with more tactile issues. Even though that Claw thing was really, like I'll put a link up over there if you guys are interested in going to find my review on that as well. That was really effed up. Another thing altogether. Anyways, I thought what we talk about today is we just chat about what I'm reading right now. Now, we're going to be doing a very quick review at the end of one of our videos coming up, because I did finally get my hands on the comic adaptation of Conan the Barbarian, the movie, issues 1 and 2. So I can take those two things and compare them to the actual I can never remember, the magazine version of the Conan the Barbarian movie, which we did a video of earlier, and I'll put a link to that up over there if you're interested in that. So what am I reading right now? Well, I'll tell you, for those of you who don't know, Superman, besides the Sword Sorcery stuff, Clark really is my guy. And it's one of these things where I can't explain it why. You form a connection with a character at a young age, and you just identify with that, and that's your personification of how you would picture comics as a child. And for me, it all comes down to Clark Kent. It always goes back to him. If some of you have seen my Instagram stuff that I've been putting up lately, I've had a fair amount of Superman that I've been reading, and I've been really enjoying it. I even went out and got this amazing find of this box set of all of the Superman DVDs, the original Christopher Reeve DVDs, including the Donner version of the number 2, which you need to have that. And it includes Superman Return, which I actually thought was a good movie. But either way, I got that on hand, and I was pretty excited about that. So I was thinking about Superman as I was reading through all the stuff the other day, and I was staring at the library. And this is a sign of really how an old man brain can really F you over. I was convinced that I had the Justice Society, Thy Kingdom Come, parts 1, 2, and 3 sitting over there in the library. Even though I haven't seen them there, I was convinced they were there. And I was digging through the library literally for days. I was going through the covers at the bottom. I thought, how did I reorganize this? And I lost these. I had these in the trade paperback format. I know I had this. This is one of the greatest Superman stories ever written. Where is it? It doesn't make sense to me. Well, Roy, I want to thank you on this one, because what happened was, before I even built the library, and we're going back years now, I had all of my comics and trade paperback stuff sitting on bookshelves down closer to the Hall of Comics. And one day I said, I need to purge this down. We have way too many things here. And I did a culling, and we got rid of a lot of trade paperbacks, some omnibus, some stuff out of the house. And the bottom line was, during that time, because I offered them to my friends before I did anything else, I gave these to Roy, because I thought Roy would enjoy them. I guess I have no memory of these ever being in the basement, ever. I am convinced they were here. I still, even though Roy has identified them, brought them back, and they're right here right now, and I'm actively rereading these right now, I still cannot picture in my mind a picture of these sitting on a shelf in the basement in the Hall of Comics. No, I had a picture of these sitting right over there on that shelf, where I've got a giant collection of Conan stuff right now. I don't know why. And that's an interesting thing, because that's really the symptom of your brain leading you down the garden path and filling in revisionist history that wasn't actually there. But I am reading those right now. I'm rereading it. My brain is convinced this is the greatest Superman story ever written. That's right. That's a very powerful statement, and that's what my brain is telling me, and that's why I'm rereading this now. Now, this is my Kingdom Come, or Thy Kingdom Come. This is a whole story about Gog, Magog. Who is that doofus that becomes Magog? I can't remember the guy's name. Nate something. He's a doofus. But it's the Superman content of this that I'm really diving into, that I will be reading. And we'll discuss this on one of our Easter eggs in a future video. But Conan-wise, you know what? Every time I hold it up, all you guys get is some sort of glary image. I'm going to take a picture of it, and we're going to put it up over there. This is a king-sized Conan issue, and it's funny because, you know, I was in the local comic shop, and I was diggity-diggity, particularly because I was looking for a King Conan issue. That's a Dark Horse book that I need so I can finish the last Robert E. Howard, well, the second last Robert E. Howard Battle Royale. The last one, I know which one I'm doing, and I'm putting it off because it absolutely terrifies me. But while I was digging along, I found that. That's right. King-size Conan. This is a Marvel book. Now, it's interesting because I see all this art and all these people who are listed at the bottom. I never knew this existed. That's right. I'm a fanophile. I talk Conan all the time. I never knew this book existed. And really, this is another symptom of my old man brain really just failing on a regular basis. So guys, what I wanted to really reinforce today is these are the two things I'm reading. These are the two things we're going to be discussing in future videos. Because it's important you guys know where we're going with this stuff. But also, be careful if you have an old man brain, because sometimes it will lead you down the garden path. Ooh, that was really scary.
There you go. I enjoy that.
Shortstop number